Afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We'll have more on the crash at LaGuardia Airport between an Air Canada plane and an emergency vehicle. That's up first. And 1 year ago today, a snap federal election was called, with the Liberals going on to win a minority government on April 28th. How would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals 1 year later? And our final Menopause Monday looks at how our personal and professional lives are affected by perimenopause. We'll have that conversation after 12:30. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. First to our top story now. The CEO of Air Canada issued a video statement this morning after one of its planes flying in from Montreal collided with an emergency vehicle at New York's LaGuardia Airport. 2 pilots were killed and dozens of passengers injured. Air Canada President and CEO Michael Rousseau issued this statement this morning.
Today is a very somber day at Air Canada. I'm here to provide information on an accident that occurred involving an Air Canada Express aircraft. The aircraft was operated by Jazz Aviation LP, which operates flights on behalf of Air Canada. First, and most importantly, I want to express our deepest sorrow for everyone affected. Our efforts are focused on the needs of our passengers and crew members, along with their families and loved ones. We know this is a difficult day for everyone, including all of us at Air Canada. We know that there are many questions, but at this early stage, we do not have all the answers, as the circumstances are still being assessed. However, I do want to share the information I have at this time. The event happened at LaGuardia Airport after Air Canada Flight AC-8646, operated by Jazz Aviation, a CRJ 900 aircraft traveling from Montreal to New York, had landed. Flight AC-8646 was carrying 72 passengers and 4 crew members, for a total of 76 people on board. We now know that the captain and the first officer were killed in this accident. We are deeply saddened by the loss of 2 Jazz employees, and our deepest condolences go out to the entire Jazz community and their families.
That's Michael Rousseau, the CEO of Air Canada. Canadian investigators will join the probe into what happened. The impact crushed the jet's nose and left cables and debris dangling from the mangled cockpit. Images from the crash site showed the damaged fire truck had flipped onto its side. There are still many questions as to what happened, but so far, here's what's being reported, that a fire truck was cleared to cross the same runway where the Air Canada flight was due to land. This was following a separate emergency that required assistance from firefighters. Experts have told CBC that when a plane is cleared to land, it has the right of way. And JF Joseph is a retired pilot with the U.S. Marine Corps and an aviation consultant. He spoke with CBC's Andrew Nichol about the protocol.
That's the assumption, certainly from a pilot perspective, that once you've been cleared to land, that you do own that concrete. The conflict here is, however, emergency operations were being conducted simultaneously, and the way that LaGuardia Airport is situated has intersecting runways, so that you can have aircraft, going 90 degrees to each other at any point in time. But air traffic control ultimately is responsible either from the tower side, controlling aircraft in flight, preparing for takeoff, and then the ground controllers controlling ground movement with vehicles as well as aircraft. So that concert of putting the operations in parallel with each other and in sync with each other is critical. The other aspect of this would be that they were probably operating, certainly were operating on different frequencies, such that the pilots did not hear what the ground activities were. So there's a lot, as I said earlier, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and the complexities and frailties of the system just bore out in this specific instance.
JF Joseph is an aviation consultant. You can follow this developing story on our website and throughout the day here on CBC. 11 minutes past 12 o'clock now. This is BC Today here on CBC. Well, the last federal election was called 1 year ago today. And while there's no election looming yet, the Liberal government is still facing questions. 3 new Auditor General reports were tabled this morning, each of which found issues with the way the government handled different situations. One is regarding RCMP recruitment, another on modernizing the public servant pay system, and a third on the immigration student program reforms. Among other findings, the report highlighted that the RCMP failed to recruit the number of officers it's needed, and that the government has made limited progress in simplifying and standardizing their pay rules. Auditor General Karen Hogan also said the Immigration Department isn't keeping up with the demand for investigations of student visa holders in the International Student Program. So 3 reports today from the Auditor General on progress made by, and criticism as well from those reports on progress made by the government so far. And today, MPs return to the House of Commons facing those reports, as well as ongoing questions about the war in Iran. We're going to delve into all of that, and we're asking you, how would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals in government? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or join our conversation on TikTok if you're watching us there. My guest is Hamish Telford, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of the Fraser Valley. Hamish, good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon.
Perhaps we can just cast our eyes back to 1 year ago today. How surprising was it or not that Canadians were headed for the polls?
Oh, there was no surprise we were going to the polls last year. We went 6 months early, but after Justin Trudeau announced his resignation, or that he would be stepping down in early January, we were almost certainly going to have a spring election. And in walked Mark Carney. His name was known, of course, from his time as governor of the Bank of Canada, as well as the Bank of England. And he had been back in Canada doing various things, writing books and sort of preparing for a political career. But he really was a political novice, very much a rookie, but he easily won the leadership race. And squeaked out a minority government in the election. And since then, his standing in the polls has only just gone up. So I guess with a year of experience, he's getting better at it.
I was going to ask you, so much of that election was around U.S.-Canada relations. And so given that there's still no trade deal, questions around the war in Iran, what is the mood right now when it comes to the Liberals?
Well, I think people have viewed Mark Carney as the right man for the job at this time. To sort of quote a colleague of mine at Dalhousie University, Professor Turnbull, it's as if Canadians hired Mark Carney to do this. Carney mania hasn't swept across the country. It's not necessarily an affectionate bond that Canadians have with Mark Carney, but they respect his resume, they respect his competency, they respect so far how he has managed the situation, particularly with respect to Donald Trump. But he has to keep managing that situation, as well as starting to deliver on results. We want to pivot our economy away from the United States. He's been traveling around the world, trying to sign up other countries and promote trade. But that takes time to filter through. And so we'll have to wait for these results to manifest themselves.
And on, how the government is doing, we have these 3 reports, right, from the Auditor General this morning. How much of that do you think might have an impact on voters?
I think some of them might. The first one on the pay system, the Phoenix pay system, this has been a debacle for about a decade now and hasn't really resonated with the broader public. Anybody who works or has worked for the federal government, though, is very familiar with it and very concerned by it, and will not be reassured by the Auditor General's report today. As for the RCMP, they have received a lot of applications, but they've not been able to process them fast enough to get officers out onto the street. The Auditor General estimates that they are short more than 3,000 officers. And I think as much as public safety is an issue that Canadians have a concern for, that's going to concern them as well. But I think the big one is the international students story or report from the Auditor General identifying possibly more than 150,000 international students who have outstayed their visa, but Immigration Canada can only investigate about 2,000 cases per year. And I think that that's going to be cause for some concern that there could possibly be that many people staying on in Canada illegally.
My guest is Hamish Telford, political science professor at the University of the Fraser Valley. And we are kind of taking stock, asking you for your thoughts. How would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals? It's been 1 year since the last federal election was called. The vote was in late April last year. Asking you, how would you rate the Carney Liberals' performance? 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. And what about those issues around international students, RCMP recruitment, and the public servant pay system? Do those resonate with you? Those were the topics of the Auditor General's reports as of this morning. What other main issues do you think might be affecting the Liberals, the view of how the Liberals are doing in government? 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Chris is joining us now from Victoria. Hi, Chris. What are your thoughts on the Liberals so far?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in general, I think the Liberal government and Mark Carney have done a pretty darn good job in many different areas, especially in their dealings with the U.S. and international relations. I assume that this is a borderline impossible task to make a lot of headway at with the state of the U.S. administration right now. I'm very interested to see what happens with the Kuzma conversations, and that's an opportunity for the Carney government to actually show us some deliverables and some results. So I'm looking forward to see how that happens. One area, unfortunately, that I think that government has done incredibly poorly in is their commitment to move away from oil and gas towards renewable energy. I was really hoping that this government might turn the page towards more renewable energy projects, and I've been really disappointed with not only the progress, but their general stance in this area. I guess the only other thing I'll add is that I think that if the Conservative government were in place, we'd be much worse off in that area. So while they are not performing anywhere near where I would like them to, I still think they're better than the other guy, which is a challenging part of our politics in Canada here.
Chris, thank you very much for the call. The issue of climate change, where has that been, do you think, Hamish, in Carney's policies and approach over the last year?
I think Chris is right that this is the biggest surprise with Mark Carney's government. Mark Carney had led us to believe before he got into politics that he was very much a committed climate activist and had recommended governments to take various policies to combat climate change. And he's rolled some of those policies back, and most conspicuously the consumer carbon tax, but also letting up on emission standards for oil and gas in Alberta. So far, there does not seem to be any buyer's remorse there. I think mostly because Canadians' preoccupation is elsewhere. We have been primarily, as Chris said, with the United States and the President Trump, as well as various economic issues. So the environment issue has sort of been put on the back burner, and Mark Carney has not been penalized for rolling back some of the signature environmental policies of his predecessor.
Let's take another call now. Dale is joining us from Fernie as we ask you, how would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals 1 year after the federal election was called? Again, our number is 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Hi, Dale. Thanks so much for calling. What are your thoughts? Hi, Dale. Can you hear me? Oh, I think we lost our connection with Dale. So my apologies, Dale. If you want to give us a call back from Fernie, 604-669-3733. Sorry about that, Dale. We have an email from Charlene on Main Island. I'm very satisfied with Prime Minister Mark Carney's performance and results so far. I'm tremendously disappointed in Canadians whom I previously thought rational and able to think in complex terms for not expecting him to work instant miracles. The guy is dealing. I'm thinking Charlene means they're expecting him to work instant miracles. The guy is dealing with an unstable and unpredictable former partner in the United States, fear and uncertainty in the rest of the world, and the specter of World War III. At home, he has to deal with hissy fits of provinces whose most urgent concerns seem to be banning books and hijabs and threatening to separate over those unless they get more Chick-fil-A. Thank you very much for your email, Charlene, and that's on Main Island. Joanne in North Saanich writes, like many Canadians, I too believe he's the right Prime Minister for the time we find ourselves in. We absolutely need someone to unite our country, to not adopt to what is going on in the United States. Canadians have shown the Conservatives at this time we are not interested in divisive language which pits Canadians against each other using political policy. Thank you very much for your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca. Okay, so 2 emails there saying we're happy with that performance. The criticism is that where are the results? And I know Charlene wrote there people are expecting instant miracles, but that's that kind of drumbeat, right? Of where are the results? At what point are Canadians going to need something more concrete from Mark Carney?
That's really the big question. How long can they hold out for this? And I think that this question, relates back to the 2 Auditor General reports. Mark Carney has a big constraint while he's trying to realize his objectives, and that is the deficit that the government is running, something in the order of $70 billion.
Yeah.
And he's trying to deal with the deficit, so he's cutting back spending. And so that's one of the reasons why we cannot investigate visa fraud, for example, or we can't hire RCMP officers fast enough. And on the foreign policy front, he's actually cut the budget for Foreign Affairs Canada, which is going to make it difficult to realize some of these policy objectives. And so how he balances these 2 things, and can he keep ahead of his fiscal cuts to realize objectives, I think is going to be the big story going forward for the next year or 2.
And on, foreign policy as well as affordability, given the impact of the conflict in the Middle East on fuel prices and, the domino effect of that. Carney has faced criticism on his position on the war, right? And he issued a statement last week saying that Canada would help partners in the Middle East when it came to the Strait of Hormuz. What is the view right now, do you think, of how Carney has managed Canada's position on the war in Iran? And does there need to be more clarity there?
Well, yes, I think so. And he has struggled to communicate an effective position. And I think he's still struggling. Again, on the one hand, there is that ominous threat from President Trump, especially with our trade negotiations ramping up for this review of CUSMA later this year. At the same time, we don't want to get drawn into a needless war, a war of choice, and it wasn't our choice. I don't think Canadians are in any mood to put Canadian soldiers in harm's way. I think Canadians think that Donald Trump, he made this mess, he can fix it. But at the same time, of course, the economic pressures are going to be there. No one around here is enjoying paying $2 a liter for gas.
I've been hearing a lot of discussion around that as well. We have another call now. Again, the number is 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Douglas wrote as well on the question of climate change. Douglas writes, absolute failure regarding global boiling and environmental issues. Just ask Stephen Guilbeault. Guilbeault being the former environment minister. Let's take another call. Jessica in Victoria, go ahead. Your thoughts, how would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals?
I think they're pretty good on foreign policy, but hang on a sec. There, that might be better. I'm very concerned about internal economics of Canada and particularly concerned about price fixing We have antitrust laws, and they're not being enforced. And big oil, the grocers, the telecoms, and the real estate investment trust rentals are all price fixing. The evidence is in. We know this. And it's a huge internal threat to our economy. And nobody in government from any party is talking about enforcing antitrust law. And it's key. But yes, we had inflation a little bit from COVID and from other things, but the scale of what's going on now is outrageous.
Okay.
Like if you look at the oil, the price shot up when the oil that was actually in the tanks underneath the gas stations was the same oil that had been there.
Jessica, thank you very much. So I'm going to go to Hamish on that. To what extent do we know that price fixing exists in any of these sectors that Jessica mentioned?
Well, certainly that's a belief that many Canadians have. I'm not an economist, so I find it difficult to sort of weigh in on that. But I would make the political note that that issue has not been given a lot of attention, but that may change once the NDP select their new leader later this month. All the signs are pointing to Mr. Avi Lewis winning that leadership race, and that's certainly an issue that he would be bringing forward. And so that issue that Jessica raises may be getting on the agenda in the very near future, and it'll be interesting to see how the Prime Minister responds to it.
And certainly goes to the bigger picture of affordability, as you touched on grocery prices, fuel, certainly on the minds of so many Canadians. You touched on the NDP. What about the Conservatives? Let me just put out our numbers once again, 604-669-3733. How would you rate the performance of Mark Carney's Liberals? And Hamish, we have some by-elections coming up in April, so no general vote, but a couple of by-elections, and we've had the floor crossings make big news over recent weeks from the Conservatives and one NDP MP over to the Liberals. But let's talk about where the Conservatives are right now. Pierre Poilievre has been traveling to the U.S. and went on the Joe Rogan podcast over the weekend, or that was broadcast. What do you make of what they're focusing on right now in the opposition?
Well, Pierre Poilievre is going through a rebranding exercise. He had a particular brand that was effective against Justin Trudeau, but the world changed and Mark Carney arrived on the scene. And so he now has to compare and contrast himself to a very different sort of leader. And Pierre Poilievre spent much of the last year when Justin Trudeau was prime minister, with the sort of the jacket and the black T-shirt, but now he's usually jacket, white shirt, tie, because Mark Carney always has a jacket and tie on. He's trying to sound more prime ministerial, trying to sort of compete with Mark Carney on that world stage with big policy ideas. The polls have suggested so far, at least, that it might be a little too little too late.
And we have, as I mentioned, these by-elections coming up. What are you watching for?
Well, I think the two by-elections in Toronto are safe for the Liberals, at this particular time anyway. They did lose a safe seat in Toronto when Justin Trudeau was still prime minister. That was one of the final nails in the coffin for him. But I think at this time they're safe for Liberals, which would give them that bare majority government that they have been seeking. But the really interesting by-election is the one in Terrebonne, just outside of Montreal. There, the Liberal candidate won the election last year by one vote, but the election was voided by the Supreme Court of Canada for misadministration by Elections Canada. And so they're doing a redo on that election, that contest. If the Liberals win the seat again, and Mark Carney is surprisingly popular in Quebec at the moment, then that gives them a one-seat majority. So I think all eyes are going to be on that Terrebonne riding.
A race to watch, so much to watch when it comes to federal politics these days. Hamish, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Michelle.
Good to talk to you again. Hamish Telford, Associate Political Science Professor at the University of the Fraser Valley. It's 12:30 now. You're with BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to wrap up our Menopause Monday series, and we'll talk about the impact of perimenopause on our personal and professional lives. And we'll ask you, what supports do you think might help to navigate this time? You can give us a call coming up for that discussion. Right now, it is time for our CBC News Update. Here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. It appears last night's deadly crash likely won't affect service between Vancouver and New York. 2 pilots were killed after their Air Canada plane collided with a fire truck at LaGuardia. YVR says New York service operates between Newark and JFK airports. It's not clear if a shooting early this morning in Cloverdale is linked to extortion. A business along Production Boulevard was damaged after being shot at. No one was injured. Police say no motive has been determined. And the BC Highway Patrol says a woman has been ticketed for speeding and driving without care after she appeared to be literally asleep at the wheel. The woman told officers she was zoned out but alert after she was stopped in her Tesla on Highway 1 in Coquitlam last Tuesday. Police say while some electric vehicles have a self-driving mode, the systems are not legal to use in BC. And now the forecast. Wind warnings are in effect for northern and western sections of Vancouver Island, with winds up to 120 kilometers an hour. On the north coast, showers or flurries this afternoon with a high of +5. Highs around -8 with flurries in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a chance of flurries with a high of 3. Highs up to 13 with lots of sunshine this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny with a high of 14. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, increasing cloudiness this afternoon with highs around 11. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. It's 12:32 now. You're with BC Today, and former CBC reporter and author Melissa Fung has been invested into the Order of Canada. Now, Fung grew up in Vancouver, and she started her career at the CBC as a legislative reporter in Victoria. She also reported in Vancouver before joining the National in 2002. Fung covered the war in Afghanistan and was taken hostage by insurgents in 2008. Her best-selling book, Under the Afghan Sky, describes that experience. Fung joined Stephen Quinn this morning on the early edition, and she described what it was like to be named to the Order of Canada.
It was very emotional, and I still, I still don't quite believe it. It's for a young immigrant girl who came to Vancouver and not speaking a word of English, and being sort of the only, believe it or not, back then I was the only Asian girl in my grade school class.
Wow.
And so never feeling like I belonged, to receive this honor, really, it just shows how everything is possible in this country, that even that little girl could grow up and receive, one of the highest honors this country gives. It's really, I'm getting emotional even talking about it.
You're with BC Today. It's 12:35. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Michelle Elliott. It is our 4th and final week of our March-long Menopause Mondays series. We've been opening up the conversation about women's health when it comes to navigating perimenopause in women and gender-diverse people. You can watch or listen to our previous episodes in the series by going to the CBC Listen app, or you can go to our YouTube page. Just search for CBC British Columbia. Today, we're going to probe into the impacts of perimenopause on women's personal and professional lives. Take a look at this video and take a listen to it by the online support community, MenopauseChicks.com.
I am a midlife woman.
And I hold up the world.
We are 50% of the population. We influence over 90% of all consumer and health decisions.
Yet media try and tell us
We're over the hill. Marketers trying to convince us
We need fixing.
We often leave medical appointments feeling
dismissed and disappointed.
Grin and bear it, they say.
you're getting older, they say.
it's just part of being a woman, they say.
What?
Really, is it?
We all have questions about our health. We all have choices, and one of them is not suffering in silence.
Well, we're taking your calls. What are the impacts that perimenopause has had on your professional or personal life? And what are the supports that you think could help with navigating this phase of life? What do you want people to know about it? You can call us now, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, or 1-800-825-5950. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca, and we are watching your comments on TikTok as well. I'm pleased to welcome my guest. Shirley Weir is the founder of MenopauseChicks.com and a women's health advocate. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Michelle.
I feel like that video sums up so much. I mean, I just hear people just having that resonate with them, right? Grin and bear it, over the hill. It's just part of getting older. Why did you want to start MenopauseChicks.com?
Well, I started Menopause Chicks partly out of my own experience. I was in my early 40s experiencing things that I was unfamiliar with. And I did what every other smart, savvy woman did. I went to Dr. Google.
Yep.
And that was disappointing. There wasn't a community that existed. This is now 13 years ago. And I was looking for validation. I was also looking for evidence-based information because, like everyone else that's listening today, I had a very full life and I wanted to make, key health decisions, and I wanted to make them quickly, but I also wanted to choose what was right for me.
It's interesting, yes, turn to Google, right? Turn to doing research, and in that video, and you've said that women drive over 90% of healthcare decisions, consumer decisions, but that information about something that women go through is still lacking. Why is that?
Well, women's health has been under-researched forever. So there's that. And then there's lack of conversation, which I think we all contribute to. Marketers, media, and the medical community have downplayed, or even women themselves have downplayed their experiences, probably out of a way to survive, right? It's like, oh, I guess I can put up with this, right, or I'll grin and bear it, as we talk about. And it's really time for us to realize that the impact of doing so is not helping us, and it's not going to help future generations.
It's amazing to me to think as well of, some things that I hadn't considered would be part of perimenopause. And now that we are talking about it, I hear, oh my goodness, so that's what that was.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, a lot of things do get thrown into the menopause
right
bucket. So I spend a lot of my days kind of helping women and gender diverse individuals parse out what is related to hormone health and what might be hormone adjacent. So maybe it's something that's you're experiencing alongside of your hormones changing. And either way, you deserve to feel amazing. You deserve quality information so that you can navigate those things that might be disrupting your quality of life.
What are the conversations that people have among menopause chicks?
Well, a lot of my members arrive overwhelmed, or they might be confused, and too many of them arrive to the Menopause Chicks community having felt disappointed or dismissed in the healthcare setting. So that kind of is those are big categories. A lot of questions around menopause hormone therapy, which of course has had a bright light shine on it in recent years. We're helping individuals feel more informed and more confident in the decisions that they're making at midlife and beyond.
So amid all of that, we're talking now about the personal and professional impacts of this experience.
Yes.
What are some of the things that you hear?
Well, I mean, women are employed. We're holding up the world right now. We're working at home and we're working outside of the home. And at this age of our life, we are also at career stages that can be quite influential in our society. And so when you layer on not feeling well, maybe not sleeping well, maybe noticing changes to mood, changes to mental health capacity, and changes to bleeding, those are like the general experiences that show up first in perimenopause. They can impact your quality of life, and specifically what the research is showing us and what I hear every day in the Menopause Chicks community is it impacts our work life.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the HER-BC research, the health and economics research that was just announced at the end of 2024 here in British Columbia showed, I mean, this might not be a surprise, but perimenopause experiences are not niche. Over 90% of women had their quality of life impacted.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for many women, they are missing work, or they might be reducing their hours, or a surprising thing for me was that 10% of individuals might be saying no to advancement or job promotions. And so if we have unmet health experiences, if we're experiencing something and we're not finding a solution, that spills over into our work performance, but also our career lifeline.
And what did HER-BC find in terms of the broader economic impacts of that?
Yeah, so we know that it's impacting the individual. We saw that many, I think on average, women were spending $900 in additional out-of-pocket expenses just to access the care that they needed. And so that's great that if they have the economic means, it's great that there's choice on the menu, but that's a really important number for us to hone in on because it shines a light on that there's still a large gap in how we access the care that we need and deserve.
Okay. And what about, when people, as you said, people are bypassing or turning down opportunities for advancement, perhaps not able to come to work? What are the spillover effects of that on the economy?
Yeah, so I think what we want to focus in on is that there's an opportunity here for leadership and workplaces to take note of these numbers, not necessarily saying women are a liability or that menopause is a disability. What we're saying is this is an opportunity for leaders to say, oh, what can we do to support the people in our workforce who are navigating these adverse health experiences? And how can we show up? Can we invest in research? Can we review our health benefits through the lens of a woman who's 49 years old? Maybe we haven't done that in a number of years. All of these things. And of course, education, conversations like we're having today, and building awareness so that everyone can come together and close these gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's put out our phone numbers again. Asking you, what are the biggest ways that perimenopause has affected you personally or professionally? And what are the supports that you think are needed? You can give us a call, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. We're wrapping up our Menopause Monday series, and my guest today is Shirley Weir, the founder of the online support community Menopause Chicks and a women's health advocate. And again, taking your calls, also your emails, bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. You touched on it there. What can workplaces do? So, it's interesting. I was watching that CBC program about menopause, small achievable goals, and they had this great scene where, it's just so well done, but the main character is needing to take some time off, and the kind of HR representative says, perhaps you need some time off, perhaps a menopause. But it was him acknowledging that this is something that could be beneficial. So you talked about benefits. Like, what are the different ways that a workplace can start to even look at this in order to support this cohort of women?
I think that the action that's required happens before an individual needs to take time off work.
Yeah.
Right? So whatever an employer can do to provide ongoing education for their workforce as well as the folks that they live with, that is going to make a huge leap forward in awareness and understanding. Education, conversation, open conversations so that employees don't feel like they have to lie about their health experiences, but telling the truth goes a long way. Reviewing benefits, as I mentioned before, and realizing that employers have this opportunity to close the gap in women's health research. So you might be able to say to your employer, hey, how much are we donating to women's health research this year? And maybe make that part of next year's agenda.
Okay. And how much of that is happening now?
Not enough. It's less than 10% of Canadian health research dollars are focused on all women's health, not just menopause, but all women's health. It's far too low.
Across the spectrum.
Across.
So, let alone
spectrum from puberty to grave.
Let alone the specific aspect of menopause. And stigma is such a big part of it, right? What can we do to actually reduce it? And you mentioned it. It's just even us just talking about it. Yeah.
I'm really excited about the reduction in stigma. I'll be honest with you. I've been doing this work for 13 years and women are not quiet, believe it or not, about their experiences. I'm also really excited. You mentioned TikTok a minute ago. My daughter is 22. She's on TikTok. She's talking about her health experiences, about how she bled through her jeans and had to tell her boss that she needed to go change. Those conversations did not happen when I was growing up. So I look to the next generation to say, like, they're not trying to crack open the conversation. They are the conversation. That's really exciting to harness that power.
Wow. And you said, people who support someone going through menopause. What about families and partners? What can they do?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things that we have to realize when it comes back to the family conversation is that the majority of caregiving in our society for people younger and older falls on primarily women in midlife. And so the only way that we can fulfill those caregiving roles is to put our own name at the top of the to-do list. We need to take care of women
That's going to be hard. Okay.
Michelle, I promise you, if we could even address sleep alone, right, then that puts us in a better position to make, stronger health decisions and to be able to carry out those roles and responsibilities that society is either putting on us or that we are choosing to pursue.
Yeah, it's sure is hard to fight that instinct, isn't it? I appreciate that, Shirley. Let's put out our numbers again, 604-669-3733, 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. What are the ways that perimenopause has affected your professional or your personal life? What do you want people to know about this experience? And what are some ways that people can be supported, that women can be supported through this phase of life? We've just talked about workplaces and families. What do you want to see? 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Lori sent us an email sharing a resource, specifically pointing out Menopalooza. And Lori writes, it's an incredible event that takes place in Victoria by women for women. And yes, Dr. Tracy Rogers was our guest a couple of weeks ago. Thanks so much for that email. Jen is our next caller now in Victoria. Hi, Jen. Welcome to the show. What are some ways that...
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm so glad you guys are talking about this. I feel like our mothers never talked about it, and now we're all going through perimenopause and suffering. So I just want to share my story. So for a year, I was having debilitating uterine pain every month, and it was like in the sense where I was taking 2 days off a month of my sick time at work just because I couldn't get out of bed. And of course, the menstrual cycle was heavy bleeding like I was when I was a 12-year-old kid. And my doctor put me back on contraception, saying it's basically the only option for me. And then I was admitted 2 weeks ago in the ICU for double pulmonary embolisms due to blood clots. So, it's just like this archaic way that women's health is being dealt with. We're getting told that, oh, yeah, just go back on the pill. There's some minor risk for blood clotting, but, it'll help you with your monthly. And then, prior to that, I was, nonstop bleeding for 3 months. And my doctor was like, oh, yes, this is totally normal. It'll sort itself out. It's just hormones. I just feel like we're so undervalued, and our medical conditions as we age are so undervalued, and they're just not supporting women the way they need to, and they're using really old methods to treat us and kind of telling you to grin and bear it, and this is just the new normal for you. Like, it's not normal.
Jen, I'm sorry for your experience. Grin and bear it. I mean, we heard that before. So why does there seem to be that gap? And you know, I'm conscious of the fact that you're not a medical doctor in this conversation, but her question is, why are doctors turning to these methods and perhaps not looking more broadly or to is something that would be more applicable to what she's going through?
So the first thing that I would like to say to Jen is that she is not alone. It's a common story. Why is it happening? Well, we talked about lack of education and awareness. In this case, I would say that it was on perhaps both parties. So the health professional is not necessarily informed in all the ways to treat heavy bleeding or even the root cause. In perimenopause, progesterone is the first hormone to decline and estrogen starts to fluctuate, okay? And that is different from our reproductive years when we were younger. The common experiences can be changes to mood, changes to sleep, and changes to bleeding. The ways to address that bleeding might include the birth control pill, as she chose, if that is your primary choice for contraception, but other methods exist. And so I want to empower women to show up at their health appointments, understanding what is on the menu. In Jen's case, she could have a conversation about a hormone-based IUD, which is very effective at treating heavy bleeding, or oral progesterone therapy can be started in perimenopause. So get informed and stay curious, and then show up at your healthcare appointment saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? What are the pros and cons for me? And we've been able to show that that leads to more positive health outcomes.
Yeah, you remind me that I moderated a panel discussion at UBC a couple of weeks ago on menopause, and they pointed to the Menopause Foundation having a list as well of questions that you can be ready with when you go to your healthcare practitioner.
Yeah.
Oh, so be armed is what you're saying. Be armed with the options and the questions that you need to ask. We have an email here on support. Hugh writes from East Van, guys need to pay more attention and be patient when menopause happens to friends and family and neighbors. Remember that if you take care of yourself, you too will experience hormonal changes late in life. I never expected to be sitting in the mammogram clinic, but life comes with surprises for all of us. So that's support.
Yeah, I would say to Hugh, I mean, in addition to being patient, encourage the women in your life to get as informed as possible and to know that they are not meant to suffer. This is an opportunity to put their own name at the top of the list.
You talked about, how workplaces can help and invest in that kind of research. What about healthcare providers, the healthcare system itself?
Yeah, so we've noticed a positive influx of healthcare providers signing up for prescribing courses for menopause hormone therapy, for leaning into more menopause education. We have a long way to go. So menopause care ought to be primary care. I do encourage my members to start with their family doctor if they have the luxury of having a family doctor. 7 million Canadians do not. We can also talk about ways in which you can expand your health team so that you can find a provider who is maybe experienced, educated in this area. And, that's going to be a very individual decision. It's based on a lot of different things, but it is one of the ways in which employers can support people in this decision making. Maybe it's making sure they have a telehealth option for their employees so they don't have to drive downtown to their health appointments. Maybe it's making sure that they review how their employee benefits already meet the needs of women navigating perimenopause and menopause. That's important. Sometimes we have these benefits for decades and we don't look at them until we need them. So it's a great opportunity for employers to say, hey, this is what you have available to you. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions?
Yeah, again, that back and forth.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, Lonnie and Kitimat, you wanted to talk about the experience of perimenopause. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to share that I heard something in my 20s from a female physician that really stuck with me about perimenopause and menopause, and it's been helpful to me as I've gone through my 40s. And it was to remember that we're not just talking about a strictly physical change. This isn't just a change in chemicals and hormones, but much like adolescence, it's a whole change in identity. There's emotional, spiritual changes that go along with it. And so I found, just kind of reflecting on, why do humans have a grandparent generation that lives past the reproductive age? That this is not all species have this, that there's a really important role for us to play as elders, and that, maybe I'm having brain fog, but part of that is rewiring of my mind for this next half of my life and this new identity. So I've just found that, making time and space to say, hey, this is a transition, and of course I want to have optimal health, but my energy levels are going to change, and the way I think is going to change, and just kind of embracing that and honoring how important elders and grandparents are, and what the next phase of my life can be for me has really helped, as well as seeking out healthcare providers such as a naturopath or an acupuncturist who can provide that more total body care of, what are some gentle supports from supplements or herbs that might help with the energy boost or that sort of thing. So I think it's really important to talk about feeling our best and looking into evidence-based medical treatments. And I also think it's important to recognize it's not just a physical change.
Wow.
So.
What a way to sum it up. I have just a minute, Shirley, but yes, it's a change in identity.
I love what Lonnie is just saying there, because what I've found is that if we understand the roles and responsibilities of our hormones when cycles are regular, like in your 20s, you are in a much better position to make health decisions for yourself when you reach midlife. And to her point as well, I work with women every day who are, running for government, changing jobs, changing, marathons that they're signing up for. It's really inspiring. We're the first generation to turn 50 and have 50 more years to plan for.
Yeah, and I love that, the role that you play now as an elder. Lonnie, thank you. What a great way to sum up our whole series here, Menopause Mondays. Shirley, so great to have you on the show.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Michelle. Thank you. Shirley
Weir, the founder of MenopauseChicks.com and a women's health advocate here in the Lower Mainland. That is it for our series, Menopause Mondays, Navigating Perimenopause in BC. You can re-listen to episodes at CBC Listen or watch them again on our CBC BC YouTube page.